Hi, this is Dr. Cairns. Here we are on the threshold of week 8, and it's amazing what a semester it's been. And before I review a little bit of our journey this semester, just want to make a few comments regarding your forum discussions this past week on leading through a crisis. And as I mentioned, Admiral Allen was the Commandant of the Coast Guard when I was at Homeland Security. And in fact, in 2008, I don't know if you'll recall, but Hurricane Gustav came ashore in Louisiana, and the people in New Orleans were very concerned and really frightened at the prospect of having another storm hit them. And so a lot of preparation and things that had changed. I want to just make some comments, though, really to your observations. And it was interesting to see that Noel and An were able to visit President Bush's library in Dallas. And just a side note, a person who I worked with at the Office of the Presidential Personnel was an individual who, as a civilian, did all the staffing for the executives that put together the library and are now leading that. So a lot of just interesting pieces that I personally have some involvement with as well. But your comments regarding unity of effort, Harris and Christy and Gary and Lisa and Lila, you mentioned that aspect of being how it's different, obviously, than unity of command. And it really is something when you think about teams is conducive. While you might have a leader or a project leader for a team, and think back to the time that you were working on your idea and you saw where they had a leader, but they also kind of had a unity of effort going on there. It's something to think about as to having maybe creative and innovative teams to be able to address issues. And that takes us to the point of going off book that Gary raised, but also goes with what Bridget and Rita said in terms of looking at goals and treatment of members as a family. Those are all things that are going to happen in times of leadership and in times of crisis where we don't have everything laid out for us. And that's one of the things I like about leading teams, is that we may have some pieces of what we're going to do, an agenda, but there's always going to be something that we're going to need to really make an ad hoc decision and think about. And then several of you, Susan, BJ, Samuel, Gary, and Lila, you talked about the visibility of a leader. And that is something that is important. Leaders need to be seen and maybe not heard, as we think of that old adage of children, but from the standpoint of maybe listening to our followers. And that's something that you also talked about. And I liked where Chris had pointed out something from Rothwell, where he said leaders and followers need to influence each other. And that's really key, that leaders need to be listening to what their followers are saying and making adjustments and adapting. And we saw that present in the leadership of Admiral Allen. And then I really like the comment that An mentioned and highlighted that was also in our text about extraordinary leadership calls for extraordinary communication. And that means we need to think about that. And Christine was showing, and Rita and others, about where he had his all hands meeting, one of being open and transparent. And so thinking about leadership and what followers were thinking maybe perhaps about the leadership of several of you mentioned. It'd be interesting to get some of the feedback of the people that were under Admiral Allen's leadership and what they may have thought about his leadership. And I would say, even though we may not have a lot to reflect on in that capacity, what we do have to reflect on is, was his leadership effective? And if his leadership was effective, then most likely his followers enjoyed being under his leadership. So some great takeaways in leadership in crisis. And actually, I'm writing an article in the next couple of weeks. I have to have it done that is based upon an incident that occurred in a fire in the Randolph Hotel, a very famous hotel in Oxford. And from that, thinking about the aspects of where they had a plan to address various issues, but there were also things that hit them that they had to make answers for, that they didn't have a template to follow. And I just want to leave you with that piece of leading in crisis, that we've had a lot more crises that have occurred as a result of Hurricane Katrina, but also 9/11 and other things where we've learned. But we can see that there are other different pieces that we need to think about. And there are some other articles that, if you're curious and you want to follow up on, is why smart people make bad decisions. And that was also based upon things that occur in our own brain that causes us to miss things. And you mentioned that, for example, with confirmation bias, and there are other aspects that happen, that flags that go up that we don't see. So great discussion there as well, and I enjoyed that. So let's talk about where we've been and what's all been accomplished as we continue forward. So I want to do a quick little review of what we've accomplished, or you've accomplished this semester, and just looking at our homepage. And we still have 12 Angry Men due this week as you work on a group project together. But we've had and started off really like gangbusters when you introduced yourselves to each other in week 1, and we moved forward to talking about the Penguins and looking at their behavior. And you had an opportunity to examine Moses and the 12 spies and their decision making, and how they could have improved their team effort and group effort, and then thinking about what makes a job meaningless and meaningful. And you could compare that to the work that Keller was writing that would help us in terms of serving God at work, would help us to have a more meaningful job. And then you explored Jackie Robinson and looking at various aspects of the team concepts that we've been studying there, and then creativity and innovation with IDEA. So you've accomplished a lot this semester. You should feel good about it. I've enjoyed having you as students and interacting with you, and look forward to seeing you in subsequent classes, or perhaps at graduation. So with that, I want to wish all of you a happy Christmas. And just want to say is, what do you call a bankrupt Santa? Saint Nicholas. Take care and have a blessed week.